Hey everybody, this is Shadow Coggy coming at you with another YouTube video. And in this video, we are going to be talking about my top 5 favorite Marvel characters. And I've definitely always been more of a Marvel fan. So I'll probably talk a little more, I'll have a little more comic input with some of these than others. I'll probably be able to talk a little more about storylines in some of these. Just because I've been a Marvel fan longer. Kind of always enjoyed Marvel stories a little more. Characters, I think I enjoy them a little more too. That's that. Okay, now let's start with my YouTube begging. I'm going to beg for you guys to subscribe, like, comment, hit the notification bell. These are all things that are really going to help me to get some interest in this channel and be able to make this a full-time job. And just be able to get in better quality for you guys, for the videos, make it more enjoyable. Maybe get someone to edit the stuff for me so I'm not doing it myself. It'll look better, all that sort of stuff. But that a lot of that's going to be up to you guys. Even maybe make the set look a little bit more nice, kind of that sort of stuff. But see, this is just me begging you guys to interact with the video more than watching it for 5 seconds and then clicking off. Oh, it's like, oh, this guy's just boring. It's whatever. Just beep. Whatever. Like, be nice if you guys could actually watch the entire video. Maybe fidget with some buttons a little bit. Maybe comment. Get the watch hours up a little bit more. This is all be great. I would love it. I'd be eternally grateful. Then maybe we can have more of a dialogue and I can make more content you guys want to watch. As opposed to just coming off the top of my head. But it's optional. You guys don't have to. I'm going to keep doing this because I want to. Hopefully it'll lead somewhere. Okay, now with all that begging done, let's get into my honorable mention portion of this video. So I'm going to have 2 honorable mentions. My 2 honorable mentions are going to be Magik and Jean Grey. So we're going to talk about Magik first, and then we'll talk about Jean Grey. I'm going to say a few things I like about them, a few things, if I have any comic things about them, I'll add them in there. Just some of my thoughts on them. I'm even going to give you guys a bit of an idea why they're honorable mentions and not higher on the list. With that, okay, so we're going to start with Magik, or her real name is Illyana Rasputin, the sister of Colossus, Pyotr Rasputin. And yep, so I think sometimes, depending on what part of Magik's life you really want to talk about, she could be classified as a hero, or she could also be classified as not a hero. So depending on what your take on it is, you could put it either way. It's very much kind of like the X-Men themselves. The X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants, it's not as binary as what most other comics are. It's a little more gray in a lot of ways, because both the X-Men and the Brotherhood of Mutants, in the end, want the same thing. They want to be able to live free without having to worry about them getting hurt, them being hated. These are things, like many minority groups, even today, these are all things they want. And these stories are, at their core, just kind of expressing to people who may not know how it feels in a medium we could maybe interact with and understand a little bit better. So that's basically how I look at the X-Men. I even look at Magik that way, because Magik starts off in the Brotherhood of Mutants, and then she slowly starts getting corrupted by the demon lord of Limbo, where she has access to, because he wants to make her the new demon lord so he can bug her off and do whatever he wants. So and as that corruption happens, she starts reaching out to people that can help her, her brother, the X-Men. They end up coming and helping her. And, then she ends up becoming an X-Men and promises to help take care of the Earth instead of harming it. Her abilities are really cool. She's got teleportation through her limbo discs. She has her sorcery. She has access to the soul sword, which also gives her armor. Looks badass, by the way. Super cool. And then her relationship where her brother ends up becoming her moral compass, because based on her powers and the way she's been affected by the demonic side of it, she doesn't necessarily have the most straight moral compass, so she needs someone to be that for her. So her older brother ends up being that for her, and I think that's a real cute little thing that you can add to that. Adds a little bit of personality to the characters. They're not just these what they are. A hero with a flaw is always better than a villain with no flaw. No, a villain with every flaw. I don't. That would sound better in my head. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about Jean Grey. My biggest gripe with Jean Grey is the fact that some of her stories, when she's tied with Cyclops, it ends up just showing a toxic relationship, which maybe some people need to see that, hey, this can even happen with heroes. It can happen in our real life too. Maybe that's kind of what that is. But to me, it's always done a disservice to Jean Grey's character, or Marvel Girl, what she was originally thing. It's always been something that's hurt her character more than it's helped it. Having her been in these relationships where either Scotty is going off with Madeline Pryor, her clone, or Emma Frost, any one of these things, it ends up just kind of hurting her character that she stays and puts up with this. I think that really, the way I really look at it that way. And I think she could do. Her character deserves more service than that, and keeping her in there. So maybe it's just something I'm not seeing in newer comics because I haven't been reading X-Men comics for a while. But comments if you guys have a run where if they show her better light than that. But all of the Phoenix stuff tends to make up for all that. Anytime Jean's involved with the Phoenix Forces kind of involved in the story, it more than makes up for that, for a lot of those more toxic moments, in my mind at least. Maybe some people don't feel that way, but that's just me. Okay, moving on. Let's move on to the actual list. So we're going to say, I'm going to say, this top 5 thing is kind of squishy a little bit, because in my top 5 place, I have 2 characters where I have them, so it's more like a top 6, but 2 are kind of in the same place. So, whatever. Don't get too butthurt about this. Okay, so the tie that is for 5th place is Daredevil and Cyclops. We're going to talk Daredevil first because I have less to say about Daredevil than I do Cyclops. Okay, so with Daredevil, my main love for him, or enjoyment of his character, really comes from the Daredevil movie with Ben Affleck, and the Netflix TV show with Daredevil. That's where and to a small extent, a couple episodes in the animated Spider-Man series from when I was a kid. This is where my main real showing for Daredevil really comes, where I see what I like. It's that's kind of what I got from Daredevil. His powers are, if you ask me, I think they're probably some of the most functional powers in any comic character. For any comic character, he gets blinded by toxic sludge, and then what compensates for that is that toxic sludge gives him the ability to access a radar. These radar senses that allow him to move around in his environment, fight crime, tell if people are lying. These are all things that come with his radar sense, and it's like, depending on what comics you're reading, whether or not it was just given full blown to him because of the accident, or if he had to work on it a bit, develop it a little more to get to the point where it's at. It doesn't really matter. If he can increase its acuity, that's even better. Then ultimately he can become an even stronger character, and that would be awesome. Okay, we're gonna move on to Cyclops now. Cyclops, Scott Summers. In a lot of ways, I didn't like him when I first got exposed to him at all, because my first exposure to Scott Summers and the X-Men was in the 2000s X-Men TV show. No, movie. Sorry, not TV show. Movie. That was my first real showing of the X-Men. And I didn't really like Scott. I ended up liking Wolverine far more than Scott. That spoiler, that hasn't changed much. You guys will see later. But after going back and watching the animated TV show for the X-Men that was also from the 90s, reading some comics, I got more of an appreciation for Scott Summers through the things he's been through, his character in general, being the older brother of 2 other siblings. It's like, that kind of resonates with me, being an older brother. But the point is, like, you can't see where he's come from, why he is the way he is. Scott really ends up being the most ideal leader in any sense. Even probably one of the best leaders out in Marvel, I would rival him with Captain America. I think that's why they butt up in AVX so much too. Because well, let's be honest, Scott is what he was trained to be. He's the ideal leader to make sure Professor X's vision comes into fruition. Scott is the way he is because he's been raised since he was a teenager by Xavier to be what Xavier wants him to be. So if you want to look at that, he's kind of a victim of Xavier too. But we're not going to go. We're not going to go into character assassinations and Charles Xavier. But I do really enjoy Scott's powers and how they seem to be linked to the Summers family. You got Scott has it in his eyes. You Havoc or Alex, who can just project it from any part of his body, and Vulcan is what Vulcan is. But a lot of that has to do with Mr. Sinister, and I kind of hope that all gets brought up in the MCU stuff, especially with the rumors we're hearing that Mr. Sinister is going to play a pivotal part in the Mutant Saga. That's going to be cool. Moving on. You really see when with Cyclops' character and the aforementioned Avengers vs. X-Men run, you see this ideal of someone else getting pushed up and really stress tested. And then on top of that, when you start seeing the cracks in Charles's vision, I guess you see, then all of a sudden Scott gets Power Cosmic, the Phoenix Force, which gives him the strength to really be able to enforce that ideal. And you really see kind of through that the cracks in Charles's worldview, his ideal, and all kind of sort of stuff. And it's a real cool case study on just because you think you're better than someone else doesn't mean you are, because your ideals could also have the cracks, maybe not ones you can see on the outside. Okay, now let's move on to number 4. Yeah, number 4. Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay, number 4. This is another character that really I wasn't too keen on doing anything with until I saw him in an adaptation in the MCU. Thor. Thor is the character I'm talking about. I really wasn't too interested in Thor at all until the MCU came out and started showing Thor. And even if you look at him in the movies, throw the comics away, the movies, he's a spoiled man baby at the beginning of the first movie. He's been given he has everything. He's been given everything. He has one of the more powerful weapons in the universe, in Mjolnir. And then, he really shows his spoiledness. Then he gets his hammer taken away, and he treats it like it's the end of the world. Like this is the biggest injustice. But then you see through the course of that movie, you see him mature. You see him realize it's not my birthright. It's a responsibility to have that power. And at the end of the movie, he's willing to give of himself, of his mortal self, even if that means he dies to save people and do what's right. He goes from being a man baby to a true hero. And it's that essence where you see that in the Avengers films, where I think he's handled the best. It's just kind of, and then the rest of the movies are spent taking things away from Thor, making him less of this heroic, interesting, stoic character into the gag of a joke, especially in Love and Thunder. I think Ragnarok probably did the comedic part the best, but even now thinking about it, maybe the comedic tone for this Thor wasn't the best because he went too goofy, made him more like an Aquaman-esque character that's a goof type thing. I don't know if any of you guys agree with me or that, but that's the way my take. Okay, let's move on to number 3. And number 3 is probably my favorite female hero of all time, bar none. It's Rogue. From her abilities of being able to take people's powers, their parts of their personality, their memories. Usually it's temporary, but then she does what she does to Carol Danvers and Miss Marvel, and she permanently absorbs all her abilities, her memories, and any personality quirks that come with it, almost killing her. See, also another thing, Rogue starts off as a villain. I don't know if any of you guys know it, but she starts off because she runs away from home after awakening her powers, and then Mystique actually takes her in and brings her into the Brotherhood of Mutants. and she's there for a long time. And it's towards the end of her time there when she encounters Miss Marvel, and even she takes her powers, even becomes her for a little evil variant of her for a while, and then it's because of these abilities and the memories it starts causing Rogue to go insane, and then she goes to Professor X to help her become more stable, and Professor X is able to, I guess, take Carol's personality and memories and hide it deep inside Rogue's psyche, so Rogue becomes more stable, and she becomes part of the X-Men, not just for free, because there's a lot of problems and a lot of people that aren't the biggest fan of Rogue joining the X-Men. But that's how that ends up, and then she ends up getting with the X-Men and being a hero from that point on. It's really cool seeing a villain become hero. Those are all cool, always cool stories. It's the same thing, hero to villain. You don't see it as often. Those are also some of the most interesting stories you can think of, because you just see someone with a high ideal crash and burn. It's the same thing with Cyclops in the AVX stuff. But moving on, we'll move on to number 2. My number 2 is mainly like when I was first introduced to my number 2. The thing that really was special to me is he was from the same place I was. We're both from Canada. I don't know if you guys know right off just from saying that who my number 2 is. My number 2 is Wolverine, my favorite superpowered Canuck. Wolverine's got some I would say probably some of the most wide sweeping comics genres of comic stories kind of ever. You got his escapades in Japan, to his time with Department H, to fighting through every world war. Here's the front, and Wolverine's powers. I think he's got the best healing factor, bar none, of almost any comic book character ever. And he's got some of the coolest weapons that are also just part of his body, his claws, whether bone or adamantium. These are all things that are super cool. And then you get Wolverine, who's probably one of the best he's probably more martial artsly trained than Batman, but he doesn't use his training because of his healing factor and his berserk rage. These are some fatal flaws of Wolverine, but it makes him more of an enjoyable character. Because you got a character like Wolverine, and he was fighting like Batman, who was really taking him out at that point, actually. So, got to nerf him a little bit to make him more interesting character, more enjoyable. Superman and the writers should take note of that. Okay, with all the shots done on Superman, let's go on to my number 1 favorite character of all time. I have memories of this character going back as far back as I can remember. My number 1 favorite superhero of all time is Spider-Man. I remember looking at Spider-Man comics before I could read. And I have a very vivid memory of seeing the first Spider-Man movie ever with my dad. Him coming to wake me up, to take me to see the movie while I was in theaters. That's a core memory if I ever have one. Spider-Man has some of the greatest stories for relating to people on the planet. He's got pretty much a story for any age. You're in high school, here, read these high school issues. You're in college, read these college issues. If you're having problems paying your bills, read these issues. He's got a little bit of something for everybody. And ultimately, Spider-Man really was someone I could relate to because he looked like me. I could look at this kid. Hey, that's me. I could be that. It's he was an ideal to look up to. He's just really special to me. I gravitated to him, and I probably know more about Spider-Man than just about anything else, any other comic book character of all time. Some of my favorite stories, in particular, Spider-Man Blue. I'm usually at the minority of this. I really like the Clone Saga. With all the clones and all that. So I enjoyed that, most of it at least. If we could cut out the Gwen Stacy bit, I think overall that would be a far better saga completely. The ultimate Spider-Man run was good. Killing Peter off and bringing in Miles, awesome. But Peter's my guy. I haven't read much but Miles, but that's besides the point. Peter Parker is my favorite Spider-Man, my favorite character. He's got some of my favorite comic stories of all time. So yeah. Well, thanks for watching this far in. Like, here's my last minute plugging. Like, comment on the video, subscribe. It all helps me a lot. Okay, that's Shadow Kage signing out. Bye.